All across the fantasy universe, welcome one and all to the 2-Point Stance. Brought to you by the good folks at fantasypoints.com. I'm your host, Brian Drake, joined alongside managing editor of fantasypoints.com, Mr. Joe Dolan. You follow him on Twitter at FG_Dolan. I am at Drake Fantasy. And folks, we're talking Super Bowl. In case you didn't know, there's a little game on Sunday between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. And then afterwards, we can all relax and get ready for the draft and free agency and all the stuff that gives fantasy footballers anxiety. But for one more weekend, the traditional football fans are balls of angst. And Joe and I, being Eagles fans, we can let our fandom out during this podcast. We're going to let that out a little later in the show and kind of not talk to you X's and O's. That's the first part of the show. But in the second half, we wanted to really have some fun and just kind of just be fans for once, and just talk about some really good personal stories that Joe and I have about the Eagles and about what this game means to us. But we've got a great show today to preview the Super Bowl. We're bringing in our good friend Caleb James from Arrowhead Pride. He is the film and draft analyst over there at Arrowhead Prime. Also hosts on YouTube the Film Room. So go search Arrowhead Pride on YouTube. Check out the Film Room, doing fantastic stuff over there. Caleb, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, guys. Thanks for having me on, man. It's Super Bowl week. Let's get going.
Joe, are you ready for the Super Bowl? Have you been watching much out there of all the hoopla as we record this? The NFL Honors Show is going on, which I couldn't give two shits about, but there's a lot going on. Have you followed any of it this week?
So one thing I will do, Drake, and I'm glad that we have Caleb. We're only going to take 15, 20 minutes of his time here because we're recording this at 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday night, the 9th of February, and the Hall of Fame comes out at 9. And we've been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Obviously, that's the last time I saw you in person. As a matter of fact, Drake, I've never met you in person anywhere but Canton, Ohio. I'm pretty sure I've met you every time I've been to Canton, Ohio, but never anywhere else. But it's going to be really cool to see guys get announced that they're going to be in the Hall of Fame. And, the last time the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, Brian Dawkins, obviously one of the all-time great Eagles, was announced as a member of the Hall of Fame class just days before the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Doesn't appear there's going to be anything like that this year, but this is
not Donovan McNabb's year. Come on,
it's not Donovan's year. Well, you and I will talk McNabb later. We don't need to. You and I can probably talk McNabb for about 3 hours. But no, I'm going to go downstairs, relax with a couple of soft seltzers. And watch the Hall of Fame ceremony tonight. I'm really looking forward to that. But that's going to be the first really bit of media that I've really tuned into this week. I've been doing a lot of reading, but not a whole lot of watching. Reading and listening, but not a whole lot of watching. I'm really going to watch that, though.
Well, Caleb, let's kick it over to you to start things off. Joe and I are Eagles fans. We fully, put that out and roll up our sleeves and tell everybody that's where our allegiances lie. You're in the Kansas City front. What are Kansas City fans anxious about? What are they worried about going into this game? Like, what is on the forefront of their minds going against these Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, number one, Chiefs fans for any playoff game of any situation for any opponent are always going to be anxious and they're always going to be nervous. Been some traumatic games in the past, and the last 2 seasons have ended not the greatest. So, yeah, there's the extreme excitement of the Super Bowl. There's the extreme excitement of being able to see Patrick Mahomes play in another one, Andy Reid being able to coach in another one, Travis Kelce having a chance to further his legacy. But you always talk to people around town, and they're going to say they're nervous no matter who the opponent would be. And the Eagles are a great team for them to be playing. They are, people have described them as a juggernaut team. I'd happen to agree. It's hard to find weaknesses on a front like that. But, I mean, my favorite part about driving around town this week, the fountains are red. You got Chiefs flags all around downtown Kansas City. I've seen more people driving around with Chiefs flags on their cars. And we had a snowstorm today. It snowed like 4 inches this morning, and you still see people flying the Chiefs flags around their cars. They're driving around. So that gets me fired up and ready to go when I see it driving in every morning.
Caleb, so before we get into the X's and O's, which you've done a great job with, as a matter of fact, I'm going to check out your analysis of the Eagles tonight from your perspective. Drake and I wanted to do this podcast from a little bit of a different perspective, just like everything's been kind of said about this game that can be said about it. There's been good breakdowns. There's been bad breakdowns. People have said smart stuff. People have said dumb stuff about the game, but I'm sure all of us included in that. But as a fan of the Chiefs, I presume you grew up a Chiefs fan.
Yes, sir.
What does this mean to you? This is I'm probably the same with me, Drake. I don't know your memories of 1980. This is the third Super Bowl I've seen my team play in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. I believe it's the same with you. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you as a person? What does it mean to you as a fan? Getting to experience that after, quite similarly, Chiefs and Eagles fans, so many years of close but no cigar.
I'm 25 years old. I grew up in 2007, 2008, 2009. Chiefs were there winning 2 to 4 games a season. Mm-hmm. The franchise was a complete joke for so long. There was an event at Arrowhead Stadium one day where the fans all wore bags over their head. They wore black shirts instead of red. And there were planes flying over the stadium with banners that said "Fire Pioli." And then to look at where they're at 12 years later, to see them playing in their third Super Bowl, to seeing them have the face of the league, it means a little, and it means something special to, I think, everyone here, because this has always been a football town before a lot of other things. You talk to a lot of people's parents who grew up here. They grew up on those 1990s Chiefs. They constantly made the playoffs, but no cigar. I've had some taste of that in the early Andy Reid days and the Alex Smith days. But then when you get, Patrick Mahomes coming to town, it really changes the way not just like the football community thinks of Kansas City, but the world community of sports as a whole. And you've seen all these exciting things that have come to like our city that's not really that big of a city. We don't have that big of a population, but, I think that the heart of the city is going to be on full display this week, as it has been, throughout the course of the Mahomes era. And I think we're just fortunate and blessed to be able to watch him play in another Super Bowl.
Now, you break down film. That's kind of your niche for Arrowhead Pride. And we were talking about what really are you focused on for this game? And you are keying in specifically on the lines. And we've heard so much talk about the Eagles D-line versus the Chiefs offensive line. How can Kansas City counteract what has been the best pass rush in the NFL, led the league in sacks? Hassan Reddick, really having a coming out party this year. You've got Kansas City with kind of I don't want to say, he is a journeyman in Wiley at right tackle who's played all over the line, and now he's found a home at tackle. How can they hold off this onslaught of just wave after wave of Philadelphia pass rusher?
Yeah, and that's a great point, because it's not just one guy on that defensive line. It's deep. They got guys that won't even be on the field some plays that are going to have double-digit sacks. I'm talking about like a Brandon Graham. But really, the Chiefs are a battle-tested unit when it's come to facing some of these pass rushes, because you take a look at who they've played this year. They've gone against some impressive players, Joey Bosa, Max Crosby, Nick Bosa, who might win the Defensive Player of the Year tonight. You've got all these guys, Von Miller before his injury. You've seen some really great defensive coordinators throughout the course of the season. Also, they've been able to handle most of the challenges that have come their way. This is going to be the biggest challenge yet. I'm working on an article that'll be out tomorrow, but really I'm talking about how I think the Chiefs are going to attack this pass rush. And really, I think it's going to have to do with Andy Reid calling some pretty well-timed screens. I really like the Chiefs receiving, running backs receiving the ball out of the backfield. Kind of my, Jerick McKinnon and Isaiah Pacheco, they've been pretty solid at that. McKinnon actually was 3rd or 4th in the NFL in touchdown receptions. He was a go-to guy for Mahomes. And then, if they can move the pocket, they'll be okay. I like the Chiefs' interior matchup. I think if they can give their tackles a little bit of help with some chips from the backs, with some chips from the tight ends, I think they'll be okay. Just get the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands quick. Don't let that pass rush jump on their back too much.
What scares you the most about the Eagles' offense?
About the Eagles' offense, to me, it's that run game, because at the times the Chiefs have struggled to stop the run, especially when they're going against a team with 2 elite wide receivers. Now, I think after the events of this game in Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago, the Chiefs DBs are playing with a lot of confidence right now. But when you talk about a team that can run the ball, the Chiefs defensive line turned in a great performance last week, but they're getting ready to go. It's a completely different animal with the Eagles in that run game. I think Jalen Hurts is as good a quarterback as there is in the NFL, and his legs and their ability to run the power run kind of changed the game just from taking it from being, that 11, that 11 on 11 aspect. They run power well. Jason Kelce in space, he can move around and do a lot of different things. But yeah, that run game for sure scares me, because also the more they're running it, the more they're keeping it out of Patrick Mahomes' hands. And, the Chiefs linebackers can get caught watching the ball a little bit in the backfield. So it'll be interesting to see what Spagnuolo does to counter the Philadelphia running attack.
I agree with that, because I think Spagnuolo, he's going to have to blitz. He's going to have to show some things, and he's going to want to get in Jalen Hurts' face. Because if you look at Kansas City in their 2 playoff games thus far, they allowed the most yards per attempt, 6.0 yards per attempt on the ground of all playoff teams. And they've also allowed 8 run plays of over 10 yards or more. So that's not great. That's over 25% of the rush plays against them have gone for 10 plus yards. So I think Philadelphia is going to try to exploit that. You mentioned Travis Kelce. You and I were talking a little bit before the show, and I was reading how Travis Kelce this year has really become, in essence, Tyreek Hill. What I mean by that is they've moved him inside on these 3-by-1 sets. And what that means, folks, is there's 3 receivers on one side, 1 receiver to the far side. In years past, when Tyreek Hill was there, Jason Kelce was that receiver Travis Kelce was that receiver who was all by himself on the side. Now they've moved him into the slot to try to get him matched up against a weaker defender. And he's had great success doing that. And we know Kansas City, they're yak monsters. They lead the NFL in yards after the catch. I mean, when you see Kansas City, the amount of 12 personnel that they're running, the amount of time they're trying to put Travis Kelce in the slot, everything is predicated on getting him a great matchup. And in this game, you could be Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, could be Avonte Maddox. Do you think they can find room against that Eagles zone to be successful and get Kansas City a W?
Yeah, I think they can. And really, it's funny they're playing against a zone defense, because that's really been where Mahomes has thrived, is, where he struggled a little bit this year in the past seasons is when he can get those guys and they just kind of beat up on Kelce in the man-to-man. They kind of go out there, they want to press him off the line. I assume this week, the Eagles are going to have situations where they have Reddick and Sweat like bumping Kelce as soon as he's off, if he's in the slot there kind of wide. But, the reason Andy lines him up there is it's because that's where he can get matchups versus, outside linebackers versus guys that he's far more athletic than, he's bigger than any slot corner he's going to go against. So I think that they'll be able to find some holes in the zone towards the middle of the field. I think Philly, they get a little too, east and west in their defensive alignment sometimes, just from kind of what I've seen from watching a little bit of film. But that's also why I like the Chiefs running backs out of the backfield on a couple routes here and there, is because if you run Jerick McKinnon on, say, a Texas route out of the backfield, and you have, all eyes on Kelce and he just makes a little outcut, well, the inside's going to be there for McKinnon to make something happen. So it's going to be that's going to be kind of the cat and mouse game the Chiefs are playing, is where can they get Kelce the ball versus where do the other guys have to step up?
Before we let you go, Caleb, I have a 2-pronged question for you, and I think I know how the first part is going to go. Let's say you were told today that the Chiefs are going to win the game, but Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce will not be the MVP. On the flip side, you're told the Eagles are going to win the game, but Jalen Hurts is not going to be the MVP. Who would be the MVPs in those 2 scenarios in your mind based on your film study?
All right, just going on my film study and kind of just some of my past experience, if it's not going to be Mahomes or Kelce, it'll probably be Chris Jones. I haven't even talked about him yet on this show.
Okay, yeah.
He's going to play a huge role. You're going to see his name tonight in the NFL honors or whatever, because he's, he had just a phenomenal season as a defensive tackle. He's a game wrecker. And, last week he had the game of his career. I broke that down. He had 2 sacks and 10 pressures. He was smoking those guys. If he can dominate the game, and if the Chiefs can pull off a great defensive performance, it's going to start with him. But if he's to dominate that Eagles offensive line, then I think you would have no option but to give him the MVP. And really, they're going to need him in run defense as well this week. And on the flip, if the Eagles didn't get it, I'd probably say it would be Josh. If Jalen Hurts didn't get it, I'd probably go with Josh. I'd either go with Josh Sweat or Hassan Reddick. I'll give it to Josh Sweat. I'll say
Mhm.
Josh Sweat has the performance of his life. The Chiefs are sliding to Reddick. They end up believing Sweat too many one-on-ones. He beats Orlando around the edge. He beats Wiley around the edge. Maybe forces a fumble. Maybe drops a great coverage into the flats, intercepts a pass or something. I'd give Josh Sweat's not getting as much respect as he deserves because I really see a guy that I would mirror right there with Hassan Reddick. Just the production's a little different.
All right. Caleb James, our guest from Arrowhead Pride. You folks, you want to go check him out over on the Arrowhead Pride website. And he's in the film room at Arrowhead Pride on YouTube. And of course, on the Twitter machine, because, for the next 10 minutes, we can all follow at least 5 people on Twitter. You're going to want to follow him at JC Scoobs. Oh, how did you come up with that name? First of all, JC Scoobs.
It's CJ Scoobs.
CJ Scoobs.
Well, growing up, my nickname was Scoobs growing up, kind of one of those nicknames that sticks with you no matter where you go. And Caleb James, that's where the CJ comes from. Real basic. And, if you like it, go follow it. If not, I don't know.
CJ Scoobs on Twitter. Appreciate the time. Before we get you out of here, let's get a prediction. Final score. Who's winning Super Bowl 57?
Well, you know me. You see what I got in my background here. I'm going to make it pretty clear. I think the Chiefs are going to win. I think it's going to be a real close ball game. I'll go 28-31. Harrison Butker wins another big one for the Chiefs with his leg.
Oh, you're forcing me to drink, Caleb. You're really doing it. Thank you so much for the time. Again, folks, go check out Arrowhead Pride. Doing tremendous work over there. A massive, massive site for Kansas City Chiefs fans in the film room on their YouTube channel. Caleb James, thank you so much, my friend. Enjoy the Super Bowl.
Yep. Y'all have a good one now.
You too, brother. Take care. All right, Joe. So Caleb breaking down the Kansas City aspect of things. And now you and I, we can get into it. All right. We can crack a beer.
Yeah, I'm not drinking tonight, Drake. I promised to the wife a little bit of New Year's resolution, cutting back a couple of nights extra a week. But
look at you.
Hey, look, hey, do you know? Let's put it out here. The day after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, by the way, now, to be fair, I don't know why I decided to weigh myself the day after the Eagles won the Super Bowl in the 2017 season. I hate when I say 2017. I weighed myself, and I think I was the heaviest I'd ever been.
Really?
I am down 20 plus pounds since then. So, I think, so I'm happy about that. I'm not,
good for you, man.
I got ways to go, but
what are you doing? Are you running? You walking? You just watching TV?
Oh boy. You've done did it now.
I know you're a Peloton guy.
I'm a Pella bro. Yeah. I got a Peloton in May of 21, and I work out basically every day now. So yeah,
good for
there we go. It's the only cardio I've ever been at. Even when I played high school football, I hated running. My form is atrocious. I would get shin splints, I was just never a cardio guy. And now it's because it's easy on your joints. Anyway, I did not expect to go on my Peloton spiel. I was like, but my wife's like, if you get this, number one, it's expensive. You better stick with it. Number two, you better not become a Peloton social media person. And I was like, I will not. I will never do it. And then after 6 months of using it, I'm like, live, learn, love well, just firing off all my cliches. No, but I was the heaviest. So that there's a little bit of a life change since then, since the last time the Eagles were in the Super Bowl. But anyway, that's where my spiel came from. Believe me, I am not a teetotaler. No one's ever accused me of being a teetotaler. I probably should teetotal a little more, but I've been taking some nights off, couple more nights off a week because of just as a New Year's resolution to myself.
Oh God, I gotta pick up where you're leaving off here. So it's Super Bowl 57. We won the Super Bowl. We being Eagles. We're in the trust tree.
Really do the we thing.
We're in the trust tree here, Joe. It's us.
Okay? I'll let it slip every now and again. I don't begrudge people who do the we thing.
Sure,
right?
I get it.
So anyway, Drake, you were entering the point.
So Philly wins the Super Bowl 5 years ago. Okay, it ends that long, arduous streak where it's close and no cigar, the NFC title games and McNabb and good teams and Andy Reid and in and out, and now Doug Peterson finally gets us to the promised land. So now we get here 5 years later, new regime, we've got Nick Sirianni, we've got Jalen Hurts. There's a few pieces left over. I think there's 8 players left over from that 2017 team. But it feels like a whole new squad. As a fan, how different does it feel to you? Because I do not have the angst that I had 5 years ago. And I tell my son this, who's just becoming a football fan now, I go, I don't get nervous for non-elimination games. I'm not sweating week 7 against Green Bay. I'm not upset at week 12 if they lose to the Cowboys. It doesn't bother me. All I care about are elimination games. That's when I start to get a little sweat on my brow. I don't know about you, but I've learned to not live and die with every regular season game. But now it matters. Now I'm pacing in front of my television, and I don't want anyone to talk to me for the first 7 hours of Sunday morning. How about you?
Well, first and foremost, I haven't been nervous this postseason because they've given me no reason to be nervous.
Good point.
Honestly, quite frankly, the last 4 playoff games the Eagles have played have been no nerve playoff games. This year, obviously, you got the 2, and in this year, they outclassed the Giants, and the 49ers had no chance once Brock Purdy went down. Mm-hmm. Last year, they got their asses kicked by the Buccaneers, and that was kind of like, I told Giants fans, I'm like, you know what that was? That was kind of like, in a way, it's not perfectly analogous, but in a way it reminded me of the Eagles last year. They probably made the playoffs 1 year too early.
Yeah. I went to Cheesecake Factory at halftime of that game.
Oh yeah. It was fine. I expected
it was over.
And then what was it? 2019, Wentz got cheap shotted out of the Seahawks playoff game, and then McCown tore his hamstring and had to play through that. So, hey, 49ers fan, Eagles fans do realize what it's like to lose 2 quarterbacks in a playoff game. So there hasn't been a whole lot of stress really since the Saints game with the Alshon Jeffrey drop in 2018. Mm-hmm. This team feels a little different because it doesn't have the Foles factor. And I mean that from multiple angles. Nick Foles, the day the Eagles clinched the first round bye, the first overall seed in 2017, mm-hmm. was Christmas Day. It was Christmas night. They played the Raiders, and Foles was
awful game. Terrible game.
Atrocious in that game. And Drake, I know you probably contributed to it too. I'm not afraid to admit it. I was like, maybe they should give Sudfeld a look. Literally, Foles was so bad in that game. They're like, there's no way they're going to do anything. He was bad in the first half of the Falcons game, and then he was the best quarterback I've ever seen for the next.
They talked about it. They said, hey, maybe if Foles doesn't play well, we'll give Sudfeld a look. It was all hands on deck at that point.
Yeah.
It wasn't a foregone conclusion that Big Dick Nick was going to lead us to a championship. No way.
And so, I went into the playoffs with this level of skepticism, but then they beat the Falcons, and you're like, all right, well, now anything can happen. Right? You're one of the Final Four. We've seen this story before. Mm-hmm. I was in Las Vegas for the NFC title game that year. John Hansen flew a number of us out there to Las Vegas, and we watched it together. Hansen's a Vikings fan.
I look forward to this next year now that I'm part of the team.
Yeah. We haven't been since. I haven't been since. I'll tell you some other parts of that story that I don't want to put out there here. But and then in that game, the Vikings drove down the field and scored first. And
scored first, yes.
That was the epitome of here we go again. Those Andy Reid choke jobs in the NFC. Even though it wasn't Andy, it was Doug, who was Andy's protege. It was, here we go again, NFC Championship. And then they just blew him out. Yeah. And then the Super Bowl, I put over 10,000 steps in my apartment, okay? 1,100 square foot apartment. I walked 10,000 steps. That's how nervous I was for that game. I don't know. I'm trying to put myself in the mind state of where I'll be on Sunday. It's hard right now because I'm incredibly calm right now.
Yeah. I feel that too. You know what it is? It's because deep down, you and I know football. We look at teams. We see how teams are assembled. A month from now, when we're reviewing this, and this is how we do this with fantasy, we look back and go, why didn't we see this? It's so obvious. Philadelphia is so much more talented than Kansas City. Their roster is incredible. Philadelphia has assembled a bomb squad to, throw back to an old 90s, 2000 term. at every position almost, Philadelphia is better than Kansas City. They just are. If you look roster position by position, I mean, outside of the most important position, which is quarterback, and we'll say tight end, but hey, Philadelphia's got a pretty damn good tight end too. But that's it. Everything else you can look at and go, Philadelphia's better and markedly better, Joe. I think that's kind of why we're calm.
But
that one position where they're better is the position that makes you nervous.
It's just, I don't know. I feel like I want to try to appreciate this. I wanted to talk about because let's be honest, I don't hide my allegiance, but I really try not to be a homer, especially if I'm doing the Ross pod. The thing about being an Eagles quote unquote homer is, for the most part in my time in the fantasy industry, it's been a good outcome to be an Eagles homer because they're usually pretty good for fantasy, especially the last couple of years. But it gets you back to this discussion with fandom, right? Mm-hmm. It's preposterous. And the cynics will be like, oh yeah, you're rooting for laundry, which you kind of are, if you boil it down to that. But what does being a fan of something mean? And one of the lines I really came up with was when we launched Fantasy Points in 2020, we launched it in April of 2020. Okay. What was happening in April of 2020. Now, we didn't just up and decide, hey guys, you know what? Let's start a company. That's a really good idea. That had been in the works for over a year. And, when we launched this, you're like, oh, how dare you? There's people dying. And I understand that with the pandemic. How dare you ask for our money? And then people are like, well, who's going to do this? And I'm like, you want to know why I thought fantasy football mattered, why football mattered, why sports matter, why music matters, why movies matter? That shit matters because it doesn't matter. And it gives you an outlet to focus on something that isn't the Bills, the pay Bills, not the Buffalo Bills, that isn't illness or isn't family issues. And, in many ways, family issues can be kind of tempered when a team's on a run,
Sure.
I lost my dad in 2014. The last conversation I had with my dad was about Nick Foles. Nick Foles had gone on the road on Monday night and outdueled Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. And the last conversation I had with my dad before he passed away later that week was about Nick Foles. I didn't know it was going to be the last conversation I had with my dad. But basically everything I talked to my dad about was filtered through the lens of Philadelphia sports. The Eagles or the Phillies, or mostly the Eagles and Phillies. He wasn't much of a Sixers or Flyers fan. But this stuff matters because you have a communal experience with your dad or your kid or your friends or your online community, Twitter or Facebook or whatever you do, if you Reddit, it really, my wife studies this stuff, man. She's a professor of sports communication at Clemson. And while she doesn't study fandom itself, she has colleagues who do. And it's fascinating. There literally are studies about being a fan of things and what people do. And I don't know how you feel, Drake. I want to get your thoughts on this, but a run like this does feel like, I feel like I'm not alone, it feels like there's a lot of people out there, pulling for the same thing as you. Get a little civic pride, be happy. In Hawaii, aloha means hello and goodbye. In Philadelphia, go birds means hello and goodbye. It's a universal greeting. Shit, man. I was in Atlanta for a Bruce Springsteen concert this week. I wore an Eagle shirt to the concert. I wish I didn't. Because my voice was gone by saying "Go Birds" all night. It was wild, and I think it shows you that there's fans everywhere. Of course, I think if you put Bruce Springsteen anywhere, there's going to be a higher concentration of Philly fans at that concert just by the nature of the beast.
Sure.
But it gives you a community. It's really hard to explain. And we are rooting for a bunch of millionaires who are wearing the same color laundry that we're wearing that day. But it's definitely a lot more than that.
No question. And I thank you for sharing that story about your father. And my dad, he's not a sports fan at all, and he could be watching this right now on on YouTube or Twitter or whatever. He just went through another heart procedure just last week. He had 5 stents put in his heart, and I think about football, and I went, my parents didn't care about sports at all. I was this big sports nerd, and I was reading the sports page every day. And my dad, he couldn't tell you who Tom Brady is. He has no clue. My dad is a gearhead. He loves fixing cars. I don't know shit about that, Joe. I couldn't change the oil on my Honda CRV, So my son, who's now 10 years old, and I tell you, just the last 2 months started getting into the NFL. And I do the Sunday night show after you on Sirius XM, and I sit down here for 8 hours watching football. And just the last few weeks, he would come down, and all of a sudden he starts getting into it a little bit. And he starts talking about the games. He's looking things up on YouTube, and his friends are starting to get into it in 5th grade at 10 years old. And, he's kind of like, oh, I kind of like the Bills. My friends like the Bills. And everything in my basement down here, if you're watching on YouTube, is Philadelphia Eagles stuff. So I'll never tell him who to root for. You root for whoever you want. That's
you're
personal.
a better man than I am.
Yeah, that's personal to you. I'd love you to root for the Eagles, and I'm going to buy you. If they win Sunday night, we're going to spend a lot of money on Philadelphia Eagles gear. You said it builds something, and the Eagles put out in 2017 when they won. Their social media team was on fire, and they would put out these great promotional videos, and one of them was about. It's called One Game, and you can look it up on YouTube, and it's tremendous. And the narrator goes through and he goes, one game. We've been through plenty of games in this city. They talk about the Snow Bowl, the Fog Bowl, and all this stuff. And he goes, really what it's about is, bringing people together, block by block. And they show like, a block in an old Randall Cunningham game. But then they show like the city of Philadelphia, and they show a map, and they talk about the ones that I'm getting emotional talking about.
Oh, geez.
They talk about the ones that brought you to the game. And I look at my and I look at my little son, and I just think how special that is. That I didn't have that with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So every night now, he and I, we throw this Eagles football around our living room, and he loves it, and he just gets into it. He wants to run pass routes, and I just keep throwing to him over and over, and I'm like, I was throwing a ball to myself. My dad, and my dad's awesome. I have nothing against my dad, but like, he wasn't a sports guy, Joe.
Yeah.
So, to hear your story and to see him get into it, I'll tweet it out. He drew an Eagles schedule for 2023. He drew all of the logos. And actually, like, he did the right home and away, and who's going to be home and who's going to away for the Eagles and all this. So for you to talk about how it matters to people and to families, and it's just more than a game and it's laundry. It is. It brings people together, and it's something you'll talk about until the day someone dies.
My wife researches something called parasocial relationships. Like, somebody even though you don't know them, and like people might have them with us, but celebrities, especially podcast host or a musician, somebody like that, somebody you listen to talk and you get into their personal lives a little bit. Like, I realized that I've never met Nick Foles, and now I realize that 99% of Eagles fans who meet Nick Foles are going to tell him, hey man, thank you for like the best night of my life. And I don't begrudge them that. But if I were to meet Nick Foles, I'd probably tell him, the last conversation I had with my dad was about you. And it wasn't the Super Bowl. It was that game in Indianapolis when Chip Kelly was the coach, which is like the Eagles' lost weekend, like when John Lennon ran off with May Pang, like the Eagles' lost weekend, their dalliance with Chip Kelly, which was fun. And then it ended in disaster. And then you go back to what you knew. You go back to the Andy Reid tree to try to get yourself back to the way John did with Yoko. And I would tell Nick Foles about that. I would tell him if I ever met Cole Hamels, I have met Cole Hamels, but if I ever met Cole Hamels again, I tell him that he threw a no-hitter in his last start for the Phillies on my dad's first birthday after my dad passed away. And I would tell him that. And like, so like when I see people out there saying, and you're going to do it. And I always do it on Super Bowl Sunday morning. There's like people who talk down to sports fans. They're going to be like, oh, I'm sorry. Is there a sports ball happening today? Do a sports ball search on Super Bowl Sunday if you want to bash your head against the wall, by the way. Oh, is it the Brits, soccer snobs love to call football hand egg. That's another one. And then, of course, people, I'm watching for the commercials. Like, you know what? I'm somebody who's like, let people enjoy what they enjoy. For the most part, if it's not hurting, other people, right, let people enjoy what they enjoy. Let people like what they like. Let people use their time the way they see fit. Especially if it doesn't hurt you, it doesn't intrude on somebody else. So if you're not a sports fan, that's fine. It's how it's basically, Jesus, man, I can't remember the last serious conversation I had with my dad. I wish I had more with him.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd still be here, but I mean, that's the way I related to him. That's the way people relate. That's the way geez, if I was in Philadelphia right now, this is all I'd be talking about to people. So yeah, it is important. It's important because it's not life or death. It really isn't. But it makes you feel really freaking good, and it makes you feel really bad. But what's the Jim Valvano line? If you laugh, you think, and you cry, that's a full day. Being a fan of a sports fan's like that. Gives you a full life. And that's kind of where I'm at here.
I remember it when, and you guys know who, and you will from watching this show, because Joe and I are going to pump out a shitload of these shows for the next few years, is I'm a Syracuse fan. I live in Syracuse. I live and die Syracuse football, basketball, lacrosse. So back in the day, this is like 1992, Syracuse was the number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. They lost to Richmond. They were the first ever 2 seed to lose in the NCAA tournament. So I'm like 11 years old, and I cry, Joe. I'm bawling in my bedroom. I can picture it right now. They lose the game. And I mean, this is Syracuse's team. They'd never won a championship at the time. And they're loaded, ready to win a national title. And I'm just bawling on my bed. And I know Sunday, I think if Philadelphia loses, that's going to be my son. And he's going to be bawling. And little kids got to go through that. Adults go through it. When you go, damn it, this was our year. I'm invested in this. Like, why didn't they win? And that's what that's what hardens you as a fan. It's not the win. You can be a Patriots fan and have 8,000 rings. God bless you. But you know what hardens you as an Eagles fan? Living through all those goddamn losses.
I've always been an optimist when it comes to like Philly sports. Sometimes the Negadelphian creeps in, but it kind of annoys me at points too. But I do remember asking my dad one time when I was a kid. This is probably even when the Eagles made their first NFC championship game of my life. I was 15. Mm-hmm. That was the 2001 game against the Rams. Which they almost won as big underdogs, but lost.
As a senior in college, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was 15. I was a sophomore in high school. It was right after 9/11. And I remember asking my dad when I was a smaller kid than that, and then I asked him, I was like, Dad, did the Eagles played in the Super Bowl? Like, because they played in the 1980 season. He's like, yeah, they played in one. They got their asses kicked, and that was all he said about the game. And I mean, it like if you knew my dad, you could see him saying that, and he'd say it with this wry kind of sarcastic smile. And like that was at a point when I never thought I'd get to see this. So, yeah. My dad never got to see him win one. I hope the Eagles make up for the lost time that he had rooting for this team. So, yeah, I mean, it's important to people. It's important to fathers and sons and grandfathers,
and wives and daughters. My wife and daughter be watching.
The game my wife bought a Nick Foles shirt, at halftime of the of the NFC Championship game in 2017 when it was obvious they were going to win. She bought. I'm going to be wearing my the same jersey I wore.
Oh, that's a good question. What are you going to wear for the game?
Oh, this is a good one. It's a Kelly Green jersey.
Okay.
But I like this one. Like I have an Eagles Super Bowl jersey, but it's Malcolm Jenkins. Just a favorite of mine for multiple reasons. And believe me, for me to buy a jersey of somebody who went to an Ohio State university, it takes a lot. But I bought it because I love Malcolm Jenkins. I am wearing a Jeremiah Trotter jersey.
Wow. Number 54, right?
Number 54, the Axeman. Yep. I'm wearing, it's the same thing I wore the last time they played in the Super Bowl when I opened a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle 20. I didn't even open that thing on my wedding day. I opened it the night the Eagles won the Super Bowl. I was destroyed. Oh my God. And then I woke up on the couch at like 3 a.m. with a half a pound of buffalo chicken dip in my stomach.
Oh, that's the best. Buffalo chicken wing dip is the best.
I felt awful. But, you know, there's worse ways to feel awful than that. But
do you know, you guys who are listening, you'll know what I'm talking about. Go to the grocery store and go in the chip aisle, and there's the chips, and then there's those glass Tostitos that are like in between the aisles, like, you know, eye level, and there's either the salsa or the cheese. And the cheese is like neon yellow.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, God knows, it's like a pound of this nacho cheese. I bought one, maybe two of those. My buddy was a Bears fan. I went to his house and I watched that Bears Colts Super Bowl with him. And I ate two of those entire bowls of cheese by myself. I don't know how I am still alive today.
And I love cheese. I'll put cheese on ice cream. So, you know, like not actually, but, you know,
I'll put ranch on anything.
Couple of pointers here. I got to give the people. Number one, if you're making buffalo chicken dip, don't go at the last minute. That's what me and Brawley did down at the Jersey Shore when we were living down the Jersey Shore when we were working for Hanson up in Jersey. And the only bottles left were the Frank's Extra Hot. Okay, do not get the Frank's Extra Hot. Okay, I literally think it's the reason I can't eat. I do like spicy food, but I can't eat super spicy to this day. That was for Super Bowl 47, which we watched at our buddy Weibel's, now wife's, house in Philadelphia, in Fairmount neighborhood in Philadelphia, which was the 49ers and the Ravens. And do not make buffalo dip with the Frank's Extra Hot. Please do not do it. It is not worth it. So there is a pointer for you. What was my other pointer? I don't even know what my other pointer was. That's a pretty damn good pointer, though. Yeah. I'll give you that one.
I'll be wearing the exact same hoodie. This just shows I'm old and I'm married. I'll be 43 this year. I've got 2 kids. I've been married for now 12 years. I realize I have not bought new clothing in so long. So I have the same Property of Philadelphia Eagles gray hoodie. I've probably worn it on a million shows. You've seen me wear them. I'll wear that. And I have a throwback, winged Eagles shirt that I wear underneath it. But let me ask you this, Joe. I put it out on Twitter the other day, and there's so much Super Bowl gear out there. You can get Eagles anything with the Super Bowl logo or blah, 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 conference champs. I am adamant, and I told my wife, my kids, I will not buy Eagles gear that just says Eagles with a Super Bowl logo on it. I don't want that. It will say Super Bowl champion, because this team has been through enough. I've been through enough with them. I'm not happy to be there. This isn't a Final Four shirt for, Marquette once every 40 years they make it. I'm buying it because they win. How do you feel about that?
I got a really cool looking trucker hat that was not expensive at all. That has like Super Bowl, and it has the Eagles logo in the middle. So that was really cool looking. So I was into getting that. But no, I actually like there's like a big thing where like the jerseys are just not, they just have like these ugly gray ones available.
The worst. Like, I would never buy that. That's not the real jersey.
Terrible company. But anyway, right, I would never buy it. And I was like, you know what? That's good that they didn't have it, because I wasn't going to drop $180 on a jersey and then they lose. It's like my wife and I were like, we're really debating, should we spend money to go? And if we were able to get tickets that, and I mean affordable in the, all right, they're not as god awful as the secondary market, but still awful. The one thing we kept coming back to is, what if they lose?
Yeah.
We blew through some savings and like they lost and especially what if they get killed? Like what if you go out there and it's like the Broncos in the first Super Bowl against the Seahawks where from the first snap of the game they're getting their asses kicked. And it's like, you know what? I'll be glad I didn't spend the thousands of dollars. And even if they win, I'm like, all right, I won't be able to. I wouldn't have been able to justify the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars anyway. So you know, I'll just be happy with that. But yeah, I mostly agree with you. But I got like a $20 hat that looked pretty cool to me. So I got that, and I'm a big fan of trucker hats. There's my Evan Williams one. So
me too.
I decided to get that.
The 2017 Super Bowl champion hats were god awful ugly. I hope if and when they win on Sunday, they're a little better looking. But there's a big issue with championship stuff that looks bad. But Joe, I might have a way for you and our audience to be able to afford some Super Bowl gear. And Lord knows I got a family of 4 here. I'm going to need some cash because I'm probably going to drop about $500 on Sunday night if they win. And the easiest way to get into the action for the big game is on Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em games. Folks, I have dropped, you don't even want to know how much money I've spent at Underdog this week. Sitting in parking lots for work, on the toilet. Trust me, I'm there. Drake Fantasy's my name. If you want to see and play against me, I'm all over the place. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite Chiefs or Eagles stats for the big game and if you get all your picks right, you could win up to 20 times your money in a single night. I do this every single week, folks. I'm trying to hit the big money. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and app, and they're making it even easier with a special pick'em for the big game starting Thursday, February 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern. That's today while we're taping this. For you folks on YouTube, that's yesterday. For you folks listening on the podcast, you'll be able to make a special pick on Jalen Hurts. Higher or lower than 0.5 total yards. That's 0.5 total yards. I'm not making that up, folks. That's not a misprint. He literally needs 1 yard in the game in order to go higher. Pair this with at least one other correct pick, max $20 entry, and you could be taking home some cold, hard cash. Again, visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store. Don't forget to register with our promo code Fantasy PTS. Fantasy points. Fantasy PTS. Get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Must be 18 or over and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit ncpgambling.org. Joe, I try to hit that freaking underdog parlay every single week. That is like my go-to with money in my account. I'm like, I'm putting in 5 bets right now, and I'm gonna max this thing out.
I love the pick 'em, and I do it for every island game. And I was so ice cold at the beginning of the year, and then I was red hot at the end. Drake, by the way, do you know we are the single worst salesman of all time? You're a salesman professionally. We forgot to tell people that you can win a fantasy point subscription.
Oh, whoa. Not 1, not 2.
But
3 fantasy points subscription.
3 people can win them. You can't really do much with 3 different fantasy point subscriptions because one gets.
Give them to me. I'll find a way.
So we're doing the Super Bowl prop pick'em contest. We had Tom Brawley on Tuesday's show to discuss it. Wednesday, if you listen to the audio feed. And what you do is you just fill it out. And the top 3 scorers are going to get fantasy point subscriptions for the 2023 season. The top overall scorer is going to get a premium subscription. The other 2 are going to get standard. The premium's $150 value. The standard's a $60 value. Oh, and by the way, I guess it's counterintuitive to advertise the super early bird because the super early bird also expires on Super Bowl Sunday, which is 30% off, but you can win a subscription for free.
What are you waiting for?
Yeah, so anyway, if you don't feel like filling out the contest, then you can just get the super early bird for 30% off. We probably should have mentioned that at the top of the show, but we'll put it in the literature.
It's in the show notes. If you want to link,
show notes,
go to the show notes. If you want to link to this contest, you can run it to your house too. It's awesome. We did a whole show about it. Go on YouTube, go back on wherever you get your podcast, listen to Joe, Tom, and I talk about it. All right, we're at that time of the show, Joe. We've got just a few days here till Super Bowl Sunday. I'm done. I'm not listening to any more prognosticators. I can do my own research. I know what's gonna, I know all the stats. I don't need anyone to spit them in my face. Joe Dolan, fantasypoints.com. Who wins Super Bowl 57?
I can't pick against Birds. 31-21 Eagles. I picked the Bengals to win the Super Bowl at the beginning of the playoff. I have gotten 2 games wrong all playoffs, by the way.
Look at you.
Just picked 2 wrong. I picked Tampa over Dallas, and I picked Cincinnati over Kansas City. And this is, by the way, this is from the beginning of the playoffs. These are my pre-playoff predictions. So I picked Eagles 31, Chiefs 21. Eagles take home their second Lombardi in 5 years.
I said on the show the other day the Eagles will win by 10 points. So I'm with you. I will say Eagles win 40-30. And I think it's one of those games where the Eagles impose their will with the run game. They're going to come out and try to expose that very young secondary from Kansas City. And in the end, it's just too much on the offensive and defensive line because Philadelphia has just so much of an advantage in that, because Howie Roseman did a huge job. And if you're listening to this by now, hopefully he has collected his Executive of the Year award at the NFL Honors, because he damn sure deserves it. So I'm going to take the Birds, and hopefully me and the kids will be crying, and I'll be crying a month from now when I'm paying the credit card bill from the NFL shop. That'll be fun. I got to get something for behind me again. I've got, if you can't see it on the YouTube, but I've got some Eagles gear back there. I need like a fantasy points thing behind me too.
Yeah, I have a little one up at the top back there, but you can't really see it. It's right next to my door up high. You can see the Eagles Super Bowl flag over there.
I have an Eagles Super Bowl ring also. My wife got
cool.
me, which is, it's
cool.
very heavy. It's very nice. But all right. And finally, Joe, I know we thought the prediction was final, but this will be the actual final thing. Most importantly, what are you drinking during the game?
Well, I'm going to have some water. I have to have my hydro flask going. I'm probably going to mix in some LaCroix. Well, how the fuck do you say that? I don't know.
I don't
It's
drink that shit.
It's just the seltzer water that is to try to stay hydrated. I am going to absolutely guzzle Evan Williams, though. I know it. And my wife is going to correctly yell at me to say, watch the whiskey, because it goes down faster than it registers, Drake.
Oh, it does. I was yesterday, I was out drinking some, it was tequila, but I was drinking some Don Julio 1942. Then I got into the George Dickel 8-year bourbon. And you're right, it does. You have a few of those, you're like, whoo, I gotta slow down. Thank God for company cards.
Yeah.
But I will be drinking some IPAs. That's my drink of choice. And my kids have a full fridge of mini 8-ounce Sprites lined up. My wife.
What about the Capri Suns, man? Get the Capri Suns going.
We got some of those. We got some of those in there. And then they're way into the Sprites. I got a pool that I put in that I'm still paying for the next 800 years. Anytime we go in the hot tub, the kids are now conditioned, because mommy and daddy have a beer in the hot tub, that they go and get the mini Sprite for the hot tub. And my wife will nurse in Bud Light for 4 quarters. I hope, Joe, a week from now we're coming back and we're talking Eagles, the Super Bowl champion.
And if we're not even going to mention it on Tuesday's show, and we'll just talk fantasy.
It's right into free agency and talking about the draft, reviewing the Senior Bowl. That's what we'll do here with our guys from fantasypoints.com. But thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. Enjoy Super Bowl Sunday. It truly is an American holiday. Have fun with your friends and family out there. Be safe. Do not drink and drive. And God willing, we will see you back here next week for another episode of the 2 Point Stance, brought to you by fantasypoints.com. Go Birds.